Good afternoon all. We are Team Visioneers. I am Sedan, this is Sumit and Shripriya. We are really thankful to you for this opportunity to present to such a distinguished panel, and we are very excited to present our strategic rationale as to whether XY Corp should enter, and if so, how should they go about it. We'll be looking at the overall market opportunity, and then we'll move on to the energy value chain and how we came up with the rationale on why XY Corp should enter the FTM opportunity that is available. After that, we'll be looking at how we will enter with a phase-wise approach, followed by a business model and the role of each division. And finally, we'll look at short-term and long-term bets, along with key risks and mitigation strategies. As you all know, India has a target of 1600 gigawatts of solar and wind capacity by 2047. The policy push is together driving a growth of 20% annually, which puts India in a very feasible position as one of the fastest growing clean energy markets globally. If we dive deeper into the energy value chain, we can ground this strategy. We can see that XY Corp currently exists in the genset, engine, key components and the life cycle business. However, the future lies more into the FTM part, where the industry is moving towards hybrid solutions, digital platforms, energy as a service and microgrids. This is where the disruption is happening, and this is the opportunity that exists in this segment right now. To kind of analyze the externalities that is kind of favoring this transition, we can see that the policies and the consumer behavior changes are kind of creating a market and a demand for this segment. And the enablers, which is like rapidly advancing technologies and lowering costs of components, we can see that this is becoming more and more commercially viable. So overall, we can see that the opportunity exists and there is a market demand. However, we also need to look at if XY Corp can win in this segment. So if you look at the industry attractiveness, we can see that the entry barriers are moderate to high, which is more towards the moderate side for technically credible incumbents, which is XY Corp's strength. We can see that the buyer power is moderate to high, as the CNI segment is very cost conscious. This provides us a very good opportunity to create customized solutions to cater to the changing consumer behaviors and create differentiation capabilities within us. And while the rivalry is high, we can see that the competition is fragmented across different verticals, and many players are more towards the generation side and an asset ownership model. Our closest competitor is Tata Corp, which already exists in this segment. However, it focuses more on energy as a service model in a tariff-based model, whereas we'll be focusing more on a performance-based model. So if we look at both the internal factors and the external factors, we can say that this is a very attractive industry and it is highly selective. And our recommendation is that XY Corp should enter now to capture the opportunity and create value for our customers. So now I'll hand it over to Sumit to look at how we will be going about this transition.
So hello everyone, good afternoon. So what our basic idea was that while building this phase roadmap, that we wanted to execute something which is practically possible, and our basis for that is leveraging the existing genset base that XY Corp has. So we have divided the phases into multiple parts. So phases 1 and 2 are more on the digital side, where we will be leveraging the data, the telematics which we get from the engines, gensets which we have already supplied to our customers. And not only the engine data, but what we can do is we can get their grid data as well. That helps us in two parts. That helps us build the energy load profiles for different customers across industries and sectors. Now this data is very important for the future phases. Next, building on the data which we have collected over these first phase, we now move on to leveraging that data and making it into something useful. So we will be planning a digital twin of the next phase. This digital twin in the first phase would be of the gensets that helps improving the efficiency, the uptime, in the first year, and secondly, when we want to move into the front of the meter market, this genset can, this digital twin can also be transformed into a service digital twin, which can help us simulate the solutions which we want to execute in the FTM segments. The next phase, phase 3 and phase 4 is, phase 3 is actually a transition phase, but here we start entering into a shared savings or a guaranteed savings revenue model, where we act as an ESCO. We partner with existing ESCO firms or energy audit firms, and based on the data which we have collected about the customers across industries, we leverage that data in order to improve their savings. Now in this ESCO model, what happens is generally ESCOs give cost savings to the internal usage of the industries or the customers. They don't look at how cost savings can be obtained from the source side. So that's where our phase 4 comes into play, where we will enter into the BESS and the microgrid market. Because since we have that data from the phase 1, that what is their load profiles, using BESS or hybrid solutions, we can do energy arbitrage that can give us guaranteed savings. When the energy costs are too high for the customer, we can switch to our solutions, and when the energy costs are not that high, we can use it to charge or charge our systems basically. Now building on these 4 phases, it's a transition about around 9 to 10 years, where we would be getting the data, building the digital backbone, upskilling our talent as well. And on that, after we have achieved all the competencies, we have proven the pilots, based on all of the expertise which we have gained, we then move on to an energy as a service provider, where we would be confident about how we are able to provide the total energy as a service to the customers. That helps, and all of these phases, if you look at it, builds personalization as a moat, because since XY Corp is already a major player in the gensets and we have a lot of data, the amount of savings which a generalist provider can give is much lesser than what we can provide to the customer. So that raises the entry barrier for other players. Even the incumbents who are already in this business, they are not able to provide that kind of a personalization mode. So that is our key goal of this phase-wise roadmap. Next, moving on to the transition, all the 3 departments of PGD, SSD, CSD will be the key enablers for this transition. So we have bucketed them into 3 main buckets. That would be the talent, the technology, and the partnerships. So on the leftmost side, we can see what are the existing capabilities of all these departments. So like power generation, PGD is very prominent in the engine design or genset manufacturing. For them, the new opportunities lie in the hybrid microgrids or the BESS systems. But they would need to upskill their existing talent, maybe hire some hybrid experts to reduce that gap of transition. In terms of technology, they would have to scale the in-house BESS systems and develop an energy monitoring system. That would also be required. And in terms of partnerships, technology and EPC partnerships will be very important for them. The components and service department will be the digital backbone of our phase transition, where they will be very much important for the digital twin development, the analytics, and the cloud and AI partnerships. With the SSD, that they will become the face of the XY Corp, where they would be interacting mainly with the customers. They will be interacting with the financial institutions for partnerships, and they would also be instrumental in utilizing or getting the data from the existing gensets which we have already installed. So this is the empowering division for energy transition module which we propose. Moving on to the business model, which is where the revenue streams are very important. Our basic understanding from business shows us that financing is a very important aspect for any transition. So that's why what we have kept constant throughout all these phases is the core product, sales and services, which would be the financial backbone in supporting all these phases. We have also ensured that the initial phases, which are mainly digital heavy, which build a digital backbone, are less capex heavy and high recurring in revenue, because that is very important to build the trust as well as understand whether we are capable into entering into this business or not. So that's why in the first phase we have given prognostic maintenance as a service, where we can use the existing data from the gensets and do predictive maintenance, which lowers their downtime and help improve the efficiency for the customers. Now, if we even charge like 10,000 rupees per year on the for our calculation, we have taken around 100,000 gensets. That gives you an annual recurring revenue of 100 crores, with maybe some initial costs of IoT retrofitments or the digital layer or the development of the digital models that cost around 60 to 70 crores. So we have taken a payback period in less than 2 years. Now what this does is it helps us to build a digital backbone. It helps us to get a lot of data from the customers, and which helps in the future phases where we enter into the ESCO model. Now, as I mentioned, with this all load profiling data of the customers across industry sectors, we have a better competitive advantage in proving our efficiencies, giving them the guarantees that we would be able to save this much amount of energy, and we would have the data to back it up. Moving on to the microgrid and the ESS business models, these models would be capex heavy, because in these we have, in ESS for example, we would have the asset ownership, so the risk would be on us. But for that, since we have already built the trust and the reliability which we have proven with our existing customers, we have estimated around a payback period of 4 to 5 years. But since these are long-term contracts, around 10 to 15 years, the payback period is sufficiently high enough for us to transition into a completely energy service provider. So this is a basic overview of our roadmap from transitioning into a one-time transaction kind of a player into a full-time front-of-the-meter energy as a service player. But all of this also comes with some risks, and they have to be mitigated. So my colleague will take you through all of it.
So elaborating on each of the business models that were presented, there are certain short-term investments and certain long-term bets that will have to be implemented across each of these phases with the different business models. So starting with the first phase, the initial IoT integration and piloting across development across the existing clientele will be of the utmost importance, and then going on to the long term of data monetization and creating a connected ecosystem across the different plants and systems along with XY's capabilities will be of paramount importance here. Going on to phase 2, creating a digital twin.
Team, you have 5 minutes.
Initially, the focus would be on creating component level twins for both the gensets as well as the engines, and then creating a closed loop system such that it's also able to support the predictive maintenance and derive some efficiency gains for the customer as well. Moving on to phase 3, that is the ESCO model. The energy audits will be the initial short-term investments that XY would have to focus on to understand the requirements of the clients, such that over the long term they can provide customized solutions for the clients for high-value efficiency gains. In the phase 4 of creating microgrids and VESS, for short-term gains, initially local EPC partnerships and creating of digital microgrid control systems for better control would be of utmost importance, which would then be scaled over long-term operational and maintenance service contracts. Coming to phase 5, the initial EAS pilot implementation would be built on the previous phase models that we would have provided to the clients, which would then be leading up to a long-term relationship of providing bundling of these services and create long-term relationship and service contracts over a span of 10 years. Moving on to the key risks. The key risks across the phases that we have outlined for our business models is initially data security, client skepticism in accepting of our methods and verification models, the capital investments that come across this, and creating the entire ecosystem going from say an IoT model to an entire EAS model, the entire scale up. That would require involve the key risks. So coming to the data integrity and cyber security, the data governance, encryption and hybrid analytics would be one of the key mitigation factors that would be of paramount importance here. The trade-off that XY would have to probably decide over here is creating a openness versus data security in the data digital twin model. That could be further mitigated by creating policies around the data sharing between the client as well as the XY corp. Moving on to the ESCO model, the performance verification would be of paramount importance such that the client is open to adoption of such systems to mitigate that standardized measurement and verification contracts as well as risk sharing clauses in these contracts would be of highest importance. Moving on to our energy as a service model, the payback uncertainty over creating of this entire closed loop ecosystem building on our previous phases would be of the major risk, since client adoption would be tricky when moving from energy services to creating an entire closed SIPs platform for the client. A mitigation factor for this would be providing smart contracts and flexible pricing, which would make them open to pilot this and implement in their facilities. So XY Corp through our phased roadmap would be moving from behind the meter to front of the meter and be a leader in the power generation system and earn it profitably, responsibly and at scale. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Team Visioneers. Jury, over to you for questions.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. So, one or two questions and some of the assumptions here. I also want to get some thoughts on, in the overall presentation, the point where we're starting to go to phase 4 and phase 5 seems like greater than 5 to 10 years. Seems could be a conservative assessment. Phase 1 and 2 seem more data, how do you kind of look at services in terms of analytics and so on. Is it really something that makes sense that today we can make money out of just analytics? Is this a more conservative approach, or how did you think about this overall? And I think that's also somewhat related to the risk. So, just seems more conservative, so I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
So the idea behind our approach was that initially, rather directly moving into a BESS or a energy as a service provider, that would require first of all huge amount of investments, and secondly it would be a more generalist solution. Now we wanted to leverage something which we already have a greater capability on, that is the existing gensets which are spread across industries and sectors. Now what this does is every industry's load profile would be different from each other. So what this helps us in, we can develop specialized microgrid solutions or even energy as a service solutions just by changing the configuration of the software part. So that's why we focused mainly in the first 2 phases on the digital backbone, gaining as much data as possible. In terms of monetization of data, yes, it is difficult because customers may not be willing to pay for something which is very recurring. But if we can sell them the value which in terms of less downtime, like in industries like manufacturing, data centers you mentioned, and with the growing concerns of scope emissions, if we are able to sell them the value which we will be providing by less downtime or even predicting the blackouts by the grid data which we collect, that would help them in their overall business as such. So and the revenues or the subscription model which we are proposing are not very high costly, like we had estimated around 10,000 rupees per month, which is very low for industries. So I believe if we can show them the economic value which our solution brings in the initial phases for the customers, and we prove it to them in terms of cost savings, that would help us in the future phases when we are getting more into risk ventures with our own assets being involved. That helps us to understand and gauge the market adoption as well. So that's why we took that approach of spending more time on the data gathering phase.
Just one follow-on. For a company that's still starting this journey compared to established players, what would be the policies that you would actually want to influence the government that will favor XY's as a company to grow in this? What do you think are the two critical policies, knowing these trends already, and how do you go about it?
So knowing the trends, right now the market is already in favor. The government policies of BESS, they are targeting around 67 gigawatt of mandatory things. Secondly, there is from the National Electricity Plan, there is a mandate for all the customers now to produce in-house energy as well. So that promotes the sustainability growth and the renewability targets as well. Secondly, all the industries now, just like SY Corp, all are facing regulation in terms of scope emissions. So they want across their value chain the scope 3 emissions, which are the highest for all of them, they want to reduce that. Now, where does this help us? Since XY Corp is already incorporated in a lot of these value chains, the incumbents or the major players in that, they will also promote our products to them, which again helps improve our financials in some sense.
Okay, since we are on this slide, your entire proposal is like capex light to start with. What is the rationale to start with a capex light recommendation?
So yes, so that's a fair question. So as we know that initially the adoption may be low, and in terms, if we directly pitch on to a very capex heavy kind of model, the adoption will be very difficult in terms of customers trying to invest in such large projects. So what our rationale was that if we start with small, something which the risk for the customer is very low, like the data is already being collected from our systems. On top of that, we are offering them a value, and that doesn't cost them much. So the adoption will be higher. Once they see that over a period of, let's say, 4 years, even with small improvements such as analytics, they are able to reduce their downtime, they are getting cost efficiencies. The willingness for the customer to buy from us, because we have built that trust, increases. Secondly, since I mentioned that from this data we will be able to personalize our solution based on the customers. So even if a customer is not our genset user, we will have the industry data. So more or less every player would have similar kind of roles. So what that helps us in, we can pitch this particular case to other players and start extracting market from our competition as well. So the basic capex light kind of proposal internally for the firm, it becomes very easy to invest in low cost projects, and it gets approval from the management if it is capex heavy, light. If it is from starting, if it is very costly, then there might be a resistance from even the internal management as well. So that's why that was our concept behind the capex light model initially.
So, 2-3 questions. So, basically, the engine telematics data is one thing that we'll get. The XYZ Corp will get, and they can analyze. How do you think we'll get the grid level data?
Yeah, so we actually research on this. So like the gensets, even the industries which I worked in and even our college, we use the gensets which are constantly monitoring the grid level voltages. There are control panels, not the genset exactly monitors that, but there is a control panel which monitors the phase, the voltage, the current level data. And based on that data, when there is a outage from the grid, it automatically triggers the gensets, and there is some 40-second delay time, and the turnover happens. So 95% of the times the genset won't be running, right? But 100% of the time that control panel should be powered on in order to ensure that there is no downtime. So from that, whatever PLC module or data module, we can retrieve the grid level data. That helps us in analyzing their load balances, whatever their load profiles are across the daytime, which helps us build their load profiles, and that will help us during BESS or microgrids, because we can map those load profiles on the energy pricing from the government, and whenever there is a high price, we can say that we will now switch over to our product, which will reduce the cost from the grid buying. So that's how we will collect that data.
But that to an extent, good. You mentioned that assumes that you have a battery or some other solution in conjunction with the grid, which ideally was level 4 that you spoke about. Because if I were to convince a customer to give his own data to me and pay 10,000 rupees to me per month, I was just trying to understand what's the value proposition for the customer.
So yeah, as I mentioned, the phase 1 and 2, we would be offering the predictive maintenance, right? So from this data, if we can model something which can predict the grid outages itself, so that would reduce the 40-second downtime which is currently on the projects that they are working on. Like for my example, I used to work in a manufacturing company where we used to run endurance tests for like 8 hours, and even if there is a 40-second blackout in that test, the customers used to run the test again overall. Now, if we have that data, grid data, and we have a model which can predict the outages from the grid itself, maybe we can run the engine before the grid fails and switch over to the genset altogether. That would reduce the downtime completely, and that is an important value proposition, I believe, if we can reduce even 40 seconds from them.
Correct, but that depends on assuming that there is a pattern to grid failures.
Yeah, that is the basis.
And so, have you, as you thought about that, there would be solutions that reduce that 40 second to zero? Most of our data centers today run at zero.
So, means like power electronic devices which are very high frequency switching devices, that can also be used, but that is also possible. But what our thought was with this grid level data, our primary thought was collecting the load profiles for the customers, which can help us in our future phases. Maybe the switching of switching whatever devices which will be required, if we can prove to them that would be more costlier than with this 10,000 rupees, it would be more feasible for us to sell to the customers.
Thank you, judges. Thank you for your answers, Team Visioneers. You can take your seat. Audience question is still there. Audience, do you have any questions? Audience or the leaders in the front?
So building on the same question which Jameson was asking, if I have the analytics, why should I not solve the problem right now itself? And why not introduce my best hybrids or microgrid solutions or UPS or any of our electronic solutions and bring it up and launch it in the first year itself?
So sir, what we could understand from yesterday's visit, currently what data we are getting are particularly for our engines, whatever telematics is there. What we are lacking here is we are not able to capture the customer's grid level data, which is very important for implementation of these BESS and hybrid systems. Yes, they will reduce the grid level usage and they will improve the customer's renewable power usage. But where we can also add a value for that is if we can understand the load profile when they are using a lot from the grids. By this data, we are also able to provide them that benefit, and that is a very big moat in terms of combating the incumbents. Otherwise, it would be a generalist solution like others, and we may not be able to capture the market share.